Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick, and I would like to welcome you to another Tech Talk in our series sponsored by Bracklet. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing the Ashley Hannigan to give us a brief talk on proxies. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to you, Ashley.
Thanks, Nick. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's Tech Talk. My name is Ashley Hannigan, and this evening we will be doing a quick dive into proxy servers, what they are and how they work. But first, I would like to thank Bracklet for sponsoring this Tech Talk. So if you did not already know, anytime you visit a public website, your personal private IP address is visible, potentially making yourself vulnerable to malicious attacks. When you're browsing the internet, you may accidentally stumble upon a hacked website. If so, the hacker immediately has your IP address and your location to do with which they please. If you're now asking yourself, wait, I thought the internet was all rainbows and butterflies. I don't think I want just anyone to see my IP address, especially a hacker. Well, then proxies are the solution for you. Now, getting into what a proxy server actually is, essentially it's a server acting as a middleman or the gateway between you, a private network, also known as the client, and the public internet, something like Google. The proxy server acts as a computer on the internet and actually has its own IP address. In today's Tech Talk, I'm going to focus on two different types primarily, although there are a few different kinds of proxies depending on what your use case is. Tonight, we're going to focus on forward and reverse proxies. Now, let's get into a real life example of when you may want to use a proxy. So let's say that you're on a private internet and you're trying to go to your favorite video game website, but this website happens to be blocked. No need to panic. You can simply use a proxy to bypass that restricted access. Another example, if you want to watch this amazing TV show called Bondi Rescue, where it's filmed in Sydney, Australia on Bondi Beach, you unfortunately cannot watch it in the United States, so you would need to use a proxy server to mock your location being in Australia so you can watch it. Some benefits to proxies include web filtering and restricting access. They can be configured to block users from visiting certain sites, including those that can be dangerous and or inappropriate for work, such as preventing employees from browsing those sites like that video game example. Even private browsing, the proxy substitutes the client's IP address for that of its own, making yourself anonymous, a ghost. Proxies also allow for connection logging, where all traffic through the proxies can be logged, which may be useful to an organization for compliance or security. More benefits to proxies include content caching. So proxies have a cache available where they can significantly reduce the latency by giving the client information and data directly from that cache rather than having to go back and forth to that web server. And finally, evade geo-blocking, like our Bondi Rescue TV show. If a proxy server is located elsewhere in a different location than you, it can help you access places based on that location. Now, proxies and firewalls. Proxies can provide a little bit of enhanced security. They can act like a firewall between your systems and the internet. Without proxies, hackers can easily have your IP address, which they can use to infiltrate your computer or network. While a proxy can be used to block malicious content, its primary focus is to protect the privacy of systems behind it. Although some types of traffics may not pass through the proxy itself, therefore proxies are not able to identify and block the same range of potential cyber threats like a firewall would. Now, if you're following along thus far and you think that proxies sound a little similar to VPNs, that's because they are at a top level functionally pretty similar. However, there are some key differences between the two. So proxies beat VPNs in terms of speed and cost, with another added benefit of a cache available. Both proxies and VPNs are highly compatible and work across all operating systems. You just need to configure them for such. Both also hide your personal IP address and only expose their own. Both also can mock your geolocation, again, like our Bondi Rescue TV show. VPNs, however, beat proxies in terms of security because it uses encryption to mask the IP address and data, so it's unreadable by unauthorized users. A forward proxy is often considered the same as a VPN or a virtual private network from the top level, but again, they are somewhat different. One of those main differences being that proxies focus on traffic that is entering into the network and just making it anonymous, whereas VPNs focus on making it anonymous while also encrypting it. Proxies are also great to balance load distribution. If you have a bunch of requests coming in, it may be a good idea to use a proxy to send them to different locations. Now moving on to how a proxy server works. In the next slides, I'm going to diagram out specifically a forward proxy. A forward proxy is a proxy that sits in front of the client. So in this example, you on your Windows computer are the client, and we have the proxy server here that sits in front of it. This proxy server is used to get data to groups of users within the client's internal network. And it is best suited for internal networks that need a single point of entry because it provides IP address security for those within the network. All right, so here's how clients and servers interact when you use a forward proxy. When the client sends a web request, it first goes to the proxy, right? It does not go directly to the internet. So this is how you remain private. So only the proxy is able to see your personal IP address. Your request goes to the proxy. The proxy server looks at that request. If it's good and it is not going to go to a malicious site, it'll send that request off. So in this example, we're going to go to google.com. In this case, our personal IP, the 11223344, are a ghost to Google. Google has no idea who we are. Google doesn't know that we're involved in this at all. Google only sees the proxy's IP here. And that's because the proxy, again, replaces your IP and makes you anonymous. And then the proxy will send that information and that data back to you, back to the client. Now, with that added measure of a cache, if you're constantly visiting a static website that is not changing, right, instead of the proxy having to forward that request every single time and then continuously send it back, the proxy is able to store that in the cache and then send it directly back to you. And this is really good to reduce latency. Now a little bit about reverse proxies. So alternative to forward ones, reverse proxies actually sit in front of web servers and they forward requests from the browsers to web servers and backend servers. The reverse proxy monitors and intercepts all incoming internet traffic before it reaches your own applications here. So web administrators can configure a reverse proxy to block specific types of traffic and only forward requests that comply with your organization's security compliances. Reverse proxies can add an additional layer of security and traffic distribution to your database servers and are a strong option for those that need heavy load balancing. So the diagram for how reverse proxies work, they act on behalf of the back-end servers, receiving client requests, again, forwarding them on, hiding your personal IP address, only exposing the proxies. And then once it has that information, it sends it back to you. And reverse proxies are all server-side, whereas the forward proxies were on the client side. Now, there is a big downside to reverse proxies, unfortunately, and that is if a hacker is able to penetrate it, then the proxy itself could expose potentially sensitive credential information. Threats like DDoS attacks can be serious. So to prevent this, network administrators just may need to beef up or use a firewall in the case of using reverse proxies. Reverse proxies themselves are often confused with API gateways. An API gateway is a specialized type of reverse proxy, but it is specifically designed for managing API requests and can perform added functionalities such as authentication and authorization, whereas reverse proxies primarily focus on request routing and load balancing. So how can you use proxy servers? Well, it's best to avoid free ones, even free VPNs, as they are notoriously unreliable, less secure, and a lot slower than your paid services. You can also use proxies manually or automatically. You can manually configure them to your network. You can also, in most cases, use an automatic configuration script. You can also deploy proxies in the cloud. So some quick examples of proxies in the cloud. If you want to deploy reverse proxies, you would want to use services like AWS CloudFront or even Amazon RDS, which is fully managed. If you wanted to deploy forward proxies in AWS services, you would want to use Amazon EC2 instances or even the Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. Now, some developer uses for proxy servers. Developers can use proxy servers when web scraping. A lot of times, if you're web scraping, you're constantly going to that same website, and oftentimes you could be blocked because your IP is just accessing that site too many times. So in that case, you would want to use a proxy server. Proxies can also be used to log and capture traffic between clients and servers, and this can be super helpful for debugging. Proxies can also be used to simulate different network conditions, such as latency and bandwidth limitations. Also, API testing can be used to test and debug your APIs by, again, intercepting and modifying requests between clients and servers. Some more uses in development. A reverse proxy is often used in the design pattern backend for front end, also known as the BFF pattern. So in the BFF pattern, each front end client, such as a mobile application, a website, has its own dedicated backend API. And that dedicated backend API serves as the gateway to the backend services, allowing the front-end client to access the backend in a way that is optimized for your specific needs. Further uses in development, proxy chaining is an advanced technique that enhances the security and anonymity of internet connections. Proxy chaining involves routing internet traffic through multiple proxy servers, at least 3, in a series, creating a chain-like structure. Best practices include using proxy servers from different geographical locations and oftentimes moving around where your proxies are located in the chain. So you can have all your Spider-Mans pointing at each other, not knowing where that source is coming from, right? If you keep moving these stuff around and reconfiguring them, helps add to your security. Now, just real quick, these are screenshots of settings from Windows and Mac of how you can manually add a proxy in there. So on your Windows, you just go to your settings. On the left, go to your network, and then you'll see a section for proxy, and then same thing here for the Mac. Now, proxies can seem overwhelming, so let's do a quick side-by-side comparison of what we talked about so far with forward and reverse proxies. So I actually found this directly from LinkedIn that I screen grabbed. I thought it was super great and useful to see. So forward proxies are on the left here. You can see forward proxies never have a direct relationship from the client to the internet. Instead, they only have that direct relationship to the forward proxy that is responsible for sending that connection and request to the internet and then to the web server. Whereas reverse proxies, the client can go directly to the internet, but does not have that direct access to the web server. Remember, the reverse proxy, the proxy sits in front of the internet there. And same thing here, the proxy is the only one that has access to that web server. So I've included my works cited page here if you would like to read further on proxies. And I would again like to thank Bracklet for sponsoring this Tech Talk. And attached is my contact information. I would love to connect and chat more. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Ashley. We are in luck and we have time for one question if anybody has a quick question tonight. Okay, thank you. Oh, sweet. Max, what's your question?
Do you have any recommendations on the best proxy or VPN services that you would recommend people use?
That is a great question, Max. I have not personally dove into that super deep. I would just advise definitely a paid service, but on a specific one, I will have to get back to you on that.
Wonderful, great question. Thank you, Ashley, for that wonderful, wonderful tech talk. And thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We'll see you at the next one.